You are Locked On Bulldogs Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Bulldogs Postcast, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me is college football analyst Jarvis Davis. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. And of course, our Locked On Bulldogs Postcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Mike Bobo had to overcome some obstacles and did. We'll talk about that. And the waiting begins for Georgia. We will discuss. But first, let's download on how it was all about the defense tonight in a battle that saw the Dogs take down the Longhorns in overtime to win the SEC championship, becoming the first team since 1909 to beat Texas twice in the same season. And Jarvis, when we were talking pre-show, pre-production, we were going back and forth on whether we wanted to start with defense or whether we wanted to start with offense, because there are so many heroes, so many players on both sides of the ball, even special teams, that really made a difference in this game. But I think the fact that we're talking about a 22-19 win, it starts with what that defense did in the first half. It even starts when you go back to, and I know you're going to love this because, you know, we are always happy to have a Michael moment, but it started early with that Michael Williams batting of the ball on 2nd and 4 on Texas' first possession, incomplete. Dalen Everett then kind of works to find the football, forces the interception, and then holds Texas to 3 points. And that was what we saw over and over with this Dogs defense, including in overtime. So how did the Dogs defense once again become the story of the game, and what? In overtime.
Challenging these wide receivers, because I think at some point you saw a lot of leaky coverage in the beginning because there was a lot of chunk plays that the defense was giving up. Guys were running wide open, and I was just like, hey, man, get out this zone. Let these dudes play man coverage and just go for what you know. And you saw, Quinn Ewers try to take advantage of that, for the most part. When you think about, the type of throws that he was making, they were going at Daniel Harris. They were kind of going at him. And I was even joking and tweeting throughout the game. I was like, okay, you want to stay with 7. And then when you try to go at 6, Dalen Everett is a different little animal. I rocks with Dalen Everett. I think this dude is a prime NFL prospect, no doubt. When you think about the type of coverage that he brings to the table. So I think overall, once, Glenn Schumann decided to say, all right, we're gonna scratch all this stuff. Like, let's start locking some guys up. We're gonna start switching up. We're gonna start bringing some pressure from that second level too, because that pressure wasn't necessarily there in that first quarter. So I think the adjustments that, once again, we have a team that makes those necessary adjustments in the second half. And when they make them, it's hard for that opposing team to come back. And we know what Glenn Schumann brings to the table, and we know where Kirby Smart heart is. And this as a defensive coordinator, he's going to make sure those guys don't make the same mistakes twice, especially coming out of the half.
Exactly. And you saw that progression even starting to build up in that second quarter, where it was. And what I liked about it, Jarvis, is, like you said, Glenn Schumann quickly found out that zone was not going to be the move. And even when, like you said, Quinn Ewers was trying to take advantage of Harris, nah, not today. You're going to try to go to Everett. And then Harris made some critical plays down the stretch as well. So those are some things that you see with Glenn Schumann talking to his guys and telling his guys what they need to do a little bit differently to slow down that Texas offense. And, Jarvis, you got to be proud of this Georgia defense as well. 253 yards going into halftime, 6 points. So they did everything they were supposed to do. And Jarvis, we can talk about multiple players who made a difference. Obviously, I know we're probably going to talk a little bit about Warren Brinson, because my God, like, he was just absolutely.
See, can we just start right there? I have to talk about 9-7. Like, when I tell you he was the guy that I kind of circle. I always try to circle a guy. I always circle Michael. They had 13. I'm gonna circle 13 every year coming into the season. But 9-7 was a guy that I circled specifically because he was coming off an injury, and I felt like when you talk about that run defense was a little soft for Georgia, from time to time, specifically more so on the edge. But when you think about guys not getting off blocks in that interior, I think that was the reason why that was the case was because 9-7 wasn't there. And when he started to come back, he took him a little time to get kind of acclimated and get healthy. But now that he's healthy, you see the dude is a disruptor in the run game. And it just shows from time to time, dude don't like to be touched. He don't like to be touched. Hands up. That's all you see. Every time he's like, boys, when they snap the ball, oh, that's 9-7 getting off the block. Trying to find the football. I just love the way he plays football. And I think that Warren Brisson deserves a lot of credit for Georgia shutting down that Texas running game, because it looked like it was going to start to get a little momentum early on. But oh my gosh, they shut that stuff down, T.
Yeah, because you really we thought this was going to be a game. At least I thought this was going to be a game like one in the trenches. I personally kind of said I think it's going to be 27-24 in favor of Georgia. Obviously, they lost Carson Beck. We'll talk about that. But this is really kind of the game that I expected. But I also expected, as good as Texas's O-line is, this D-line is better. And I felt like as the game went on, every single player on the defense, but particularly that front, kind of showed what they were about. And, Jarvis, when you look at the stats, right, they're not that exciting. They're not that exotic. They're just average. But we know Jalen Walker might have gotten one solo tackle and a sack and a tackle for loss. Doesn't matter. The disruption that he caused. I mean, literally, I think after a while, Quinn Ewers was seeing ghosts.
Oh, yeah. Like you could just tell by the body language of Quinn. Because there were moments in this game where he kind of understood like what was going on. I feel like he had a good idea, like, okay, this is probably starting to look like the first matchup did. And it didn't necessarily from a number standpoint, but I think the feel and the thought of it, well, like you mentioned, talking about seeing ghosts and everything like that, because only time you really saw him with an opportunity to complete a pass was when he was taking those deep shots. And now and then, I know Texas got the favorable call, that PI with Dalen Everett. But outside of that, because the ball was underthrown. I mean, that's the only reason why they ended up it looking like a PI. So I think that when you have a guy like Ewers, who's such a timing and rhythm type guy, and they got him up out of that like pretty quickly once they made those necessary adjustments, I think that those are some of the things that I feel like it made Quinn Ewers look the way he did. And I even said, I tweeted this out during the game. I was like, if Texas wants to win this game, they're gonna have to put Arch Manning. And I'm not talking about coming in and running no quarterback draw, because I even Tanae was, my wife was, she was watching the game with me, and I was just like, hey, what kind of DEI world do we live in if you got a white quarterback with last name Manning, coming in running a quarterback draw or design run play? I was like, oh yeah, man, we have made it in America. if Arch Manning is the designated running quarterback, I just love it. Absolutely.
Right. I thought that was very interesting as well, that they didn't get him in on more plays that were actually passing plays, because once you kind of establish that, nope, you're going to just use him. Exactly. Right. And so that was interesting to me, because they only allowed him to have a couple pass plays in that first game as well. And obviously that was because Georgia's defense shut him down. But I think tonight was interesting. But what I will say as well, and of course we're going to talk about it on the other side, is a lot of times it's just like the matchups and kind of the synchronicity of things. And it's forgetting the heart sometimes, I think. Two players that I want to talk about. Well, you know what? I'm going to talk about one player, and then I want to talk about a group, if you will. So let's just talk about Chaz Chambliss. I mean, the ceiling off of the edge to say you will not get out of the pocket and run this way. You will not.
And I've been one to be critical of Chaz Chambliss, and y'all know how I am, Bulldogs family. I am a guy that I will admit my wrongs, and not necessarily being wrong, but I will call people out, and then I will definitely give them the credit when they do, because he's the guy one of those guys that I feel that has stepped his game up in these probably about the past month or so. Chaz
Yeah.
has been playing absolutely lights out when you're talking about rushing the passer and setting the edge, because we know that was a big issue early on in the season, specifically in the run game. A lot of teams would
and
take
those
advantage
mobile
of that.
quarterbacks. Yep.
And the mobile quarterbacks not keeping contained, just all the little basic stuff. And you've seen Chaz has come along quite nicely. And it's perfect timing, right? As you get ready to go into the playoffs, you're gonna need that. Now that you got the bye week, you're gonna need those players making those necessary plays to be out there. So yeah, I think Chaz is been a guy who's been stepping up, and he's been absolutely lights out as of late. And I think that can mean nothing for the Bulldogs, and that can mean trouble.
Yeah.
That's trouble for whoever they play come playoff time.
And one more group we got to talk about before we move on, and that's the DBs. I felt like Texas tried it in the beginning, and there were moments where it was like, oh God, it's going to be a long day. But you really have to give the DBs, the secondary, a world of credit for a number of things, actually. Like you said, when Glenn Schumann decided to move out of zone and move to man-to-man coverage, slowly but surely, you saw those DBs picking up. They were picking up and saying, nope, you're not going, you can get your 7 yards, but I guarantee you're not going to get more than that. How many times, Jarvis, did we also see them come up to the line and all of a sudden it's a tackle for loss? The receiver doesn't even get in position to kind of run down. And granted, we know that in the the first half, they did give up 4 explosive plays. True. It was rough, but in the end, they did everything that they were supposed to do, whether it's Dalen Everett saying, that's okay, I'm going to come back, I got 2 picks. If that's KJ Bolden saying, okay, you ran down the sideline against me, but I'm still here and I'm still going to make sure you don't do anything else. Dan Jackson even showing up.
Yes, stop right there. Let me go. When I say I enjoy the way this man plays football,
Indeed.
it is so refreshing. I'm talking about the man puts his pads on folks. I know Georgia Tech people are a little salty about, last week, but hey, get over it. The man is an absolute missile. Yep. When that ball is in that wide receiver's hands, he's trying to separate the man from the ball. And I just feel like that is such a technique that is just missing from the game of football today. And it makes me it gets emotional when I start thinking about it. But yes, I love the way this dude plays football, and I want him to stay exactly the way he is.
Yeah.
Like, man, keep playing football like that, man, because I absolutely feel that, hey, somebody's going to give you a chance, whether it be a special teams monster. I feel like he can be that, but yeah, I just love the way this whole group played, and specifically Dan Jackson, because I think it's just something about the way he plays ball that just gets me happy.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Jarvis, it wasn't all peaches and cream and happy things, but because the unthinkable happened, hey, Mike Bobo had to make the impossible happen, and he did that. We'll go between the hedges to discuss. This episode of our Locked On Bulldogs postcast is brought to you by Mint Mobile. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks, right? It has to be easy, no hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it because I have nephews that I'm always looking for getting something for them for Christmas. So it turns out it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time I spent on hold waiting to break up with my old provider or their old provider. So to get started, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. There, you'll see that right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. And find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premier wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at Mint. So, Jarvis, this was one of those games where we kind of knew in the first quarter, I'll be honest, in the first quarter, we kind of knew it was going to be a slugfest because Georgia's first possession was a 3-and-out after Carson Beck couldn't convert it. Second possession, ended with something that we are all too familiar with, which was an incomplete pass to Dylan Bell. And all of those drops in the beginning were not on Carson Beck, by the way. So that was a catchable ball. And then, the offense did manage somehow to get 6 points on the board with just 54 yards in the first half. But the real story here was the unthinkable happened. Georgia's defense held Texas and the missed field goal. So you get the ball back, and Carson Beck he has 1 second. So really all you can do is just heave it up and hope for a prayer that, it's a Hail Mary situation, except his arm never got fully in rotation. So it was right there, kind of bent back. And that was all you saw was Carson Beck flat out. So first thing, Jarvis, what was your thought when you saw Carson Beck flat out on that ground, not moving a muscle?
Oh, I was like, the Bulldogs are in trouble. I'm trying to, they're gonna have to come up. I was like, Mike Bobo is gonna have to earn his money in the second half of this game. I'm talking about some game plan is gonna have to be changed, sir. All that pass happy stuff, that's going out the window, Jack. Those days are over with. Depending on how long this man is going to be out. But if 14 is in the game, you best believe that they're going to have to change the way this offense looks. I think you got to focus in on, Trevor Etienne. I even tweeted it out, at halftime before we even knew Carson Beck was going to come back, because I felt like if they went back to more 12 personnel, if they start to use tight ends more, feature those guys a little bit more, even Todd Monken. I know a lot of people love Todd. I love Todd too. He was a 12 personnel monster. But I think that was the way that you were going to beat Texas, but spreading them out, 11 personnel, shotgun. It just didn't look right
wasn't working.
Texas defensive front, they were winning. They were winning their battles, and you got Makumba, number 4 for the safety for Texas. The dude was just playing lights out football, and he wasn't scared of anything going deep.
Right.
That man was coming downhill and trying to smack somebody upside the head in the run game, and he was out there making plays, trying to force fumbles whenever they did put it in the air. So I think overall, that first thought was, I was like, Bobo's going to have to earn his money in the second half, and he's going to change his thing up tremendously.
Exactly. I thought the same thing. I said, oh my, we always give Georgia credit on both sides of the ball for their ability to make adjustments at halftime. But this is the unthinkable adjustment. And Gunner Stockton has been a guy that most have said, oh, did you see him even on the trash plays? He didn't look like he was worth it. Even on the practice field, he didn't look like he was a guy who could be next man up if something ever happened to Carson Beck. A lot of people said that was it for Georgia. Not so fast. But before we talk about that second half, one of the reasons, in addition to what the defense was able to do, you and I have been talking about this for a couple of weeks. I think I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, and you were like right there for the cosign. These tight ends for Georgia have really, really saved the day. So many times in blocking packages, saving the day, in catching, on a 3rd and long to move the chains. They did everything they needed to do tonight to help this team stay in the game. So you look at Ben Yurosek. That was probably the first play that I saw tonight where I said, they're going to be critical. They're going to be critical. And then the next play, you see Oscar Delp. And of course, then there was the drop by Arian Smith, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Sure.
But ultimately speaking, I just wanted to give more credit to that tight end room, because they played lights out as well. And again, don't look at the numbers, because if you look at the numbers might tell you otherwise. But you had to watch that game to see how important 12 personnel was to this Dogs team.
Yeah, I think Oscar Delp, I almost had to kind of rub my eyes a little bit. I was like, well, wait a minute, who is that? And it wasn't on a catch. It was on a running play, because Delp had come down and kind of, double team slip with Monroe Freeland, and then Delp kind of eased on up to that second level and picked up the linebacker ETN, just kind of skeeted right off his butt. I was like, oh yes, that reminds me of Mr. Number 19, who about to be Offensive Rookie of the Year for the Raiders in the NFL, Mr. Bowers. Those are those type of plays he used to do on the regular. I got so used to him just taking pride in blocking, and you just don't see that in tight ends in the NFL. We tend to cover one that, is just not a priority for him.
Yeah.
And I
It's
ain't gonna
just
say his
not.
name,
Yeah.
I ain't gonna say his
No,
name.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Blocking is not a priority, but these Georgia Bulldog tight ends, they take pride in it, and you
Yes.
can appreciate that. Even Lawson Lucky, he had a critical catch, and like you said, going into halftime, all of that didn't go well for Georgia. It seemed they were still in it. We're talking 6-3. That's still a game.
Yeah.
And check that from earlier. I was talking about it was a punt, I meant to say, instead of a field goal that then led to that final catch or that final play. And there went Carson Beck. So then camera pans, you see him hugging a guy, and he's not coming back out. There goes Gunner Stockton, and you're thinking, oh my. And then he did the unthinkable. He actually marched these dogs down the field and got him a score.
Yeah, and I think there were two specific plays, two third down plays actually, where
Yes.
that was really key for him, and he did it by running the football. I mean, because his legs are an asset, right? That's one of the reasons why he's at Georgia, because of how his mobility, right? So
yes,
I think that and a credit goes to Mike Bobo for that as well, because I know Mike Bobo gets a lot of criticism, and some of it is warranted when it comes to play calling and sequence of plays and timing of those particular play calls. But I think that he really did a good job of using Gunner Stockton for what he is, and not trying to make him into something that he's not.
Exactly.
And I think with the quarterback draw, when he took that big old hit in overtime, like that's quintessential Gunner Stockton, because if he would have dropped back and tried to throw that football, I would have been looking at him crazy like he did right
when he did that right before the game. Right?
Overtime.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? The only reason they even went overtime because he threw that interception. So I feel like Bobo did exactly what he was supposed to do. He put in a sequence of plays that Gunner should be comfortable with, and a lot of them were running the football team. And those are just the facts. Like, I'm not throwing shade at the man, but hey, it is what it is. It is what it is when it comes to Gunner, and I think that he got the job done.
He got it done, and what symmetry it is, because remember, this is how Alabama outdueled Georgia, by making a quarterback change that they had to make for a different reason. Jalen Hurts to Tua Tagovailoa. This, of course, was more about injury, but how about the symmetry that is what ends up getting Kirby Smart the title this year? The symmetry of it all.
And to add to that, the fake punt. Everybody remember the fake punt? That didn't work.
Right. That traumatized the world.
Right, and that traumatized the world.
Like, what? Look at Kirby taking chances.
And it's
and it took it at the perfect time.
Sure. And as soon as they converted that punt, I even tweeted out during the game. I was like, this is Kirby telling Sark, like, hey man, this is how we do things. And I know when to do stuff like this. Because when you actually think about it, Thorson being out, the punter being out, like, you really think they're going to? And they had one, I forgot the guy's name. I think Ham. His last name was Ham. He was actually practicing punts on the sideline. I got Caleb Johnson from 929 was saying, hey, he was at the practicing punts on the sideline. You really thought he was gonna throw that? Like, so when it just goes to show, like, the savviness and the timing of it all, and Kirby knowing the importance of getting some points on that particular drive, and that ended up getting that 3 points that they needed in order for Texas to even tie it up instead of take the win. So I think that this was eerily similar to some past SEC championship games, and I thought that Kirby passed the test. He passed the test tonight.
Yeah, well, there was one more area where Kirby was saying, you're going to learn today how we do it over in Athens. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about now the dogs have to wait. This episode of our Locked On Bulldogs postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Now, you know, the Falcons have a big one coming up tomorrow. They're going against the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. And right now, the Vikings are 5.5-point favorites. But if you think it might go another way, you might want to check out FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. And FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. So, Jarvis, before we go into that, of course, I want to tell everybody about Locked On Sports Atlanta, which is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel and is programmed to bring you all Atlanta sports on one channel. Locked On Sports Atlanta also brings you the Falcons, Hawks, Braves, and the Georgia Bulldogs streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So before we talk about the wait, the next less than 24 hours, really, before we talk about that, I just wanted to go to one more area where Kirby Smart played a Georgia brand of football, and that's how he utilized Trevor Etienne and Nate Frazier.
Yes, T.
We got to talk about that because that was so critical for the way that he and Mike Bobo schemed, especially in that second half where you could see that run game of Georgia's kind of wearing down that defense for the Longhorns. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that too, because as you mentioned, in taking the fake punt, that was Kirby Smart sending a signal like, hey, I can play a chess match with you as well if that's what you want to do. But I also think the rushing game, which they ended up having 37 carries for 141 yards. Of course, Trevor Etienne, 16 of 94, none more important than the 4 yards he got at the end of the game.
Absolutely, T, because, you know, when this offense was struggling and Carson Beck was just going through his mental lapse of how to play quarterback at the University of Georgia, I said, one is your guy.
Yeah.
You know, he's the guy that you can lean on. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
He's RB1. Get him the rock. He's explosive. He can do it all. I'm talking about pass it to him too. You know, you can make it you can make this offense so simple. And I think this is going to be something that you're going to going forward, because the Dogs not only have to wait on their opponent, but they have to wait to see how severe this injury is to Carson Beck. So if Carson Beck is going to be out for an extended period of time, Trevor Etienne and Nate Frazier are going to be so important.
Yeah.
And you know what? This might give the Dogs a little bit of an advantage as well when you think about having to change things up and redo or reshape that game plan, because you got a little taste of it tonight in these last quarters with Gunner Stockton, because you know it's going to be a lot of design quarterback runs, going to be probably some rollouts. A lot of that's going to be going on. A little bit more 12 personnel. You know, tight ends are more involved because you can't trust the wide receivers to catch the doggone football.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that, you know, Trevor Etienne and Nate Frazier were big players tonight, you know, in being that duo, you know, and being able to be effective. And I think that's going to be the thing that's going to help the Dogs if they want to get another natty. It's going to have to fall on the backs of these running backs, because these are the most talented guys on this offense, you know, regardless if Carson Beck is on the field, in my humble opinion.
Oh, yeah, agreed. Nate Frazier, he may have only had 6 carries for 47 yards, but it was a bruising.
Football, sir.
Yeah, that's the only thing. Yes, you got to hold on to the football, but those 47 yards were some bruising 47 yards. And Trevor Etienne as well had 5 catches for 28 yards. Nate Frazier 1 for 9 yards. So yeah, if you get them involved in the passing game, I think that also gives another level and another layer to what Mike Bobo and Kirby Smart can do. But who are they going to do it against? We don't know, because now the wait begins. I think that obviously the question was, what will happen if Georgia lost this game? That was that might have been an easier answer. But now that Georgia's won the game, where do you kind of see them falling into that top 12?
Oh, they got, I mean, like, if we're talking about being straight up real, like, you beat a top 5 team twice in the season, come on. Why should they be right? They should be right behind Oregon, in my humble opinion. Like, right behind, they should be number 2.
I agree. I agree. Because also they went 2-2 against some 3-2 really, if you think about it, against some very tough SEC teams that were ranked.
Yes, absolutely.
Ranked high.
Yeah, ranked very high. So I think as much as this committee tried to remove, man, I'm just be straight up. They tried to remove them, when they lost, drop. I think it's six spots. I think they dropped.
Yeah. Yep.
You know what I'm saying? So when you think about that aspect of, they have to give the credit now. They have to give them the bump. I know they're ranked number 5, so they should be no less than 2, ranked number 2 with that bye week, and hey, and let them get healthy, and like I said, and find out what's going on with Carson and see how long he's going to be out, if at all.
Yeah, and it'll be even more difficult for them if Clemson happens to pull off the win tonight, because hey, who blasted Clemson earlier in the season? Georgia. So I think, I agree with you. I felt like this was a hard way to go.
Let them mess around and win the ACC championship. Come on now.
Yep, exactly.
One of the hardest, if not the hardest schedule in college football.
Oh, it was. No. That was actually a point that many analysts made about Georgia and the fact that they shouldn't have been number 5 even at this point, because if the College Football Playoff Committee says that strength of schedule is the number 1, the most important criterion that they look at, then what are we talking about? We get that Oregon is undefeated, so we know that's going to automatically get you in that number 1 spot. But if the number 1 criterion is strength of schedule, and you beat Clemson, number 14 at the time, and you beat them down, you barely lose to Alabama, you beat Texas, now twice, you had a rough game against Ole Miss, but you came back and you beat Tennessee. To me, tell me that that's not a tough schedule. And Jarvis, if we keep it real, you know what Florida did on the back end of this season. You know how good Florida looked. So that 34-20 win that Georgia got against Florida,
they beat Ole Miss.
There it is. So exactly. So that to me is something that also plays in their favor, because while Florida isn't necessarily a ranked team, you were able to still pretty much put it on them. So I'm very interested to see if the Dogs are where they belong. I agree. I think they belong in that number 2 spot.
Absolutely. And I think that, now we wait to see how the chips fall. And I think that, the waiting game for the injury status of Carson Beck is going to be the big key. And like I said, regardless of if he's able to come back or not, I mentioned this earlier on, Trevor Etienne is healthy. He looks very healthy to me. So y'all better ride that horse as long as you can.
Indeed. And we also hope for Dog Nation that Brent Thorson doesn't have any major injury, because how many times, Jarvis, did he flip the field tonight and give Georgia an opportunity to be able to score and also stay in this game? Thanks for making Locked On Bulldogs Postcast your first listen of the day. For your second listen, be sure to check out Locked On Bulldogs, and be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also free and available wherever you download your podcast. We'll see you soon.